کنفرانس در پارلمان انگلستان. کمپ اشرف، زمان اقدام. جامعه بین المللی وظیفه حفاظت از ساکنان اشرف را بر عهده دارد. پارلمان انگلستان 31 ژانویه 2012. بارونس بوتروید، عضو برجسته مجلس اعیان انگلستان، ریاست مجلس اقدام 1992 2000. پروفسور لورد تورنبرگ، لورد کلارک، بارونس ترنر، بارونس هریس، لورد مگینس، دیوید ایمس، مایک هنکاک، مارک ویلیامز، دکتر ماتیو اوفورد، پروفسور گای گودوینگیل، سر جفری بایندمن، مالکوم فاولر، سرهنگ وسلی مارتین، دکتر محمد شیخلی. کنفرانس در پارلمان انگلستان. کمپ اشرف، زمان اقدام. جامعه بین المللی وظیفه حفاظت از ساکنان اشرف را بر عهده دارد. پارلمان انگلستان 31 ژانویه 2012.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce myself. My name is Betty Boothroyd. I am a member of the House of Lords and I sit on the independent crossbenchers in that house. And it is my great privilege today to welcome you all to this meeting in the Houses of Parliament at Westminster and to thank you very much for your continuing support of this movement with so much persistence and vigour, and for turning up on this very bitterly cold day. And I know some of you have come from quite a long way away. Now, we have a special panel today, and a very powerful one too, since it's a cross-party panel from both sides, both Houses of Parliament, and all sides in our houses. And joining us too are prominent lawyers who will illustrate the breaches that are taking place at Ashraf and at Camp Liberty. And also we have a very special guest from the United States who I've just had the pleasure of meeting. Here he is on my left. Like prize fighter, doesn't it, on my left? Here he is on my left, Colonel Wesley Martin, and he's very welcome. Colonel Martin is extremely knowledgeable about Camp Ashraf. He was responsible for the protection of the camp and was there when the United States government pledged protection to the residents after they voluntarily handed over their means of self-protection in that hostile environment. And shortly we shall of course be hearing from Colonel Martin. Now, my friends, the humanitarian situation in Ashraf and the suffering of the residents by the Iraqis who were supposed to protect them has a very long, painful history which we are aware of. But by the end of last year, let's be honest, our hopes were raised somewhat. They were raised that finally a peaceful solution would come into fruition. And despite having used their own resources and energy and the imagination on turning that barren land into a livable city, the residents decided to leave their homes for the sake of and in the belief of obtaining a peaceful solution elsewhere. I think, some of us ask ourselves, why did these people have to leave Ashraf to enable the United Nations to start its work in identifying each and every one of the 3,300 people there? And why couldn't they go through the usual United Nations refugee procedures without having to relocate inside Iraq? Just think of the cost of this transfer, the enormous cost it must be for Iraq. Some of us find that rather sinister, not quite understanding why that was necessary. We need an answer as to why the United Nations agreed to this. But what is more bewildering is the current situation. On Christmas Eve, the United Nations signed a memorandum of understanding with the Iraqi government designated the former US-based Camp Liberty as the new relocation site. But it's now become apparent that the Iraqi regime is turning that site into a prison. The residents are being denied access to basic sanitary facilities, to medicine, to medical treatment, to drinking water. They're denied access to their lawyers. Iraq insists they cannot take with them to the camp their belongings, their vehicles, their bicycles, whatever it may be. I think a more accurate description of Camp Liberty would be a concentration camp designed for the purpose of subjugation, and who can tell what the end will be for the residents there. Ladies and gentlemen, while human rights and property rights are being violated, the United Nations remains silent and doesn't publicly criticise the Iraqi government for the breaching of the terms of the Memorandum of Understanding, for violating the rights of asylum seekers which are enshrined in the United Nations charters and in international law, and for making the conditions of a peaceful settlement possible. So, my friends, we are here today to give voice to these issues. We seek an answer and a workable solution to the crisis. All of us here today stand with the people of Ashraf. We shall not allow them to be oppressed and ignored. We shall use what voice and what influence we have with our political parties, with our government, with the decision makers in the United States, the European Union and the United Nations Security Council to take action by implementing the agreements that are already in place to resolve this crisis and bring peace and security to the people of Ashraf, who, as our chairman Lord Corbett defined as the bravest of the brave. Finally, let me say this. We all know that historically women are not allowed their rights in the Middle East. Yet the women of Iran have taken a high profile in the most challenging circumstances and environment. Their brave stand for their rights and those of their fellow citizens is an inspiration to us all. And in particular, I highlight the role of their leader, Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, who is the driving force behind this massive international campaign. In bringing the range of views from the extreme ends of the political spectrum under one roof and behind one desk and in one panel is a hard task, but she has managed it. It is a clear indication of her tolerance, sense of understanding and her ability to listen to diverse views and find a common denominator. That is why so many non-Iranians, as well as millions of Iranians, trust her to be the leader for peaceful change. Ladies and gentlemen, I am sure that you will agree with me that managing such change is a most difficult task for any public figure. Mrs. Rajavi has proven qualities that make her fit for that task. That is why we want to start today and send her very good wishes to her from this meeting. Thank you very much indeed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a galaxy of talent before us today. Now, our next speaker is a dear old friend of mine. Not old friend, long-standing friend, let me put it like that. He's Lord Clerk of Hampstead, a distinguished leader of the campaign for Iran freedom for over 30 years. Tirelessly supported the cause of democracy and is a leader particularly in the campaign for the protection of Ashraf residents. My dear friend Tony Clark, let's hear from you.